Hi guys, this is going to be our first video on statistics, and statistics is pretty important because it is a big part of the SAT. So whenever you guys take that, this is going to be something that's on there quite a bit. So I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of it and that we have a good solid foundation. So we're just going to start with some basic vocab. The first one is, what is it? So what is a statistic? It is a numerical fact or calculation formed from a quantity of data. So you basically get a bunch of data, you get a numerical fact or calculation, and then that's called a statistic. What is the difference between a single variable data and two variable data? Single variable data is looking at one set of data. So for example, how far away do you live from school? And this can be represented by bar graphs, dot plots, histograms, box plots, and many more different graphical representations. Two variables is comparing two sets of data. So you have like age versus the number of text messages sent per day. And we represent two variables graphically with scatter plots. And then the last bit of information is, what is the difference between numerical and categorical data? Numerical data is quantitative data is numerical information such as temperature, weight, hours. So you would do like the temperature every single day and collect all of that data. That would be numerical data. And then qualitative data is descriptive information. So it would be like eye color or something that it describes versus being a number. So those are your two different types of data that you can collect. And whenever we do this, we're going to focus on single variable data. I think you guys focused on two variable data in Algebra 1, so we're not going to do a lot of that here. We're just going to do single variable data, which is also this SVD right here. And I want to show you guys how to get to these single variable data values in your calculator, and then I'm going to show you how to do some different things using your calculator as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our calculators over here. I'm going to show you guys how to enter this in and get the data. So you're going to first click the stat button. You're going to go and click enter right here. And then I already have stuff in my L1 list, so I'm going to clear it. So you arrow up where this black box is highlighting here, and then you click clear, enter, and it clears your whole list. And now I'm going to go ahead and type all of this in. So let me move this over here a little bit. So I'm going to type in 2. So I just click 2, enter, 7, enter, etc. Okay. So I'm just entering my list. 32, 36, 43. Okay, and then you always want to check that you've done it correct. So that's what this checksum is here. So what you do next to get to all of these values is you go stat, over to calc, and then it says one var stats, which is one variable stats. You click enter right there. This should say L1 because I just put all of my numbers in L1. Go down to calculate, and then it does this. Now this is the checksum. So this box right here is the sum of all my x's. These numbers should match. If those match, that means I typed all of my numbers in correctly. And then what these other values are different things. So this little X bar is the mean or the average of all of your data. This is the checksum or the sum of all of your things. This is the sum of the squares of the data, which we're not going to use. These two things are your standard deviation. This one is for a sample, this one's for a population, and we'll talk about that way more coming down the road. The N is the number of data points in a set. So like in this set, we had 9 different data points that we put in there. This is your minimum value, and then if we scroll down here, we can get to these other ones. So you have Q1, median, Q3, max, and these are our 5-number summary, which we'll talk about when we get to box plots. But that's how you guys get to all of these values, okay? So let's just start with a little bit of description. So let me come back over here. So it says, the first thing we're going to figure out is a measure of central tendency. And what that is, it's a single value that attempts to describe a set of data by identifying the central position within that data. So there are 3 different values of central tendency that we work with. The first one is the mean, which you guys have hopefully been doing forever. So the first thing we want to write down is just the definition of that. So the definition of the mean is the average of all of the data. And all that is you just add up all of your data and you divide by the total number. And then your calculator actually does this. So the mean up here is represented by this X bar. So if you plug all of it in, it'll give you your mean up there. Next definition is the median. The median is the middle number when data is put in sequential order, which just means from lowest to highest. Okay, and then your calculator also gives you that. So let me do a little different highlighting here. So the median is right here. So it'll give you the middle of your data just by looking at those values in your calculator. And then the mode is the number that occurs the most. And this one we don't really use a whole lot because it doesn't really tell us the middle of the graph. It just tells us what is used the most. And then one other important value that measures spread, not the center, so how far apart your data is spread instead of the center of our data, is something called range, and hopefully that's familiar to you guys. Your range is just your maximum value minus your minimum value. Okay, and so then if you go back up to, let's just do a different color up here, you would do this max value minus this min value, and that would give you your range. So you have a lot of information in those one variable stats in your calculator, so it's important to know how to plug those in. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about representing our single variable data graphically, and we're going to start by doing histograms. So a histogram is similar to a bar graph, but now the x-axis has intervals of numbers instead of one category. So this would be like a bar graph over here, where each bar is representative of one thing, one category, like US, Japan, etc. Histograms have intervals. So the intervals go along the bottom up here. So I think this goes from like 100 to 150, 150 to 200, 2 to 250, etc. The height of the bar displays the number of occurrences or the frequency in that interval, and you get to choose the interval unless I give you a specific one. Each interval is called a bin. So each of the lengths that I have in here, if this is going up by 50, your bin is going to be 50 because that's what you're counting by to create your intervals. And then if you want to plot a value that lies on the interval number, you place it in the bar to the right. So we'll talk about that in this problem right here. So the first thing it says is you have this histogram. So it's the minutes you go to school, and then this is the frequency. So there are 12 people where it takes 10 to 15 minutes for them to go to school. There are 10 people, it takes them 15 to 30, etc. Okay, so the first question is, where would we place the value of 15 in the histogram? So if it took someone exactly 15 minutes to make it to school, that's on the actual bar right here. And so what that does is the numbers that are on the bar, it always moves up to the right. So the 15 is actually going to be in the second bar. So 15 is going to be in this bar right here. Okay, and then so same question, where would we place the 75? So since you're on the bin width right there, it's going to go in the second category. So this is actually going to be in the fifth bar. And then to figure out how many total data pieces we have, we just look at the heights of the bar. So this bar has 12, this has 10, this has 6, this has 8, and this has 1. So if you just add all those together, you get that there are 37 total data pieces in the set. And then the last question is, what interval does the median, remember median is the middle of this data, what interval does the median that's a terrible question. What interval does the median of the data within? Where is the median? What interval is it in, and how do you know? I think is what I was getting at there. So we know median is the middle, so I'm going to take 37, and I'm going to divide by 2. So let's see what that becomes. 37 divided by 2, 18.5. So that means 18 to 19 pieces of data is where your middle is going to occur. So if we go back up to this bar up here, I only have 12 in the first bar. So there's no way I'm going to 18.5. So if I go one more bar up, then I'm going to have gone through 22 pieces. So that means the 18 to 19th piece of data is actually in the second bar. This would be the second bar. So I'm not going to ask you to do a whole lot of questions like that, but that's how you kind of work with the histograms. What we are going to work with is actually creating them. So let's create a histogram first by hand, and then I'm going to show you guys how to do this with the calculator, and then you're going to practice. So let's create a histogram first. So it says the winning Super Bowl scores from 1983 to 2002 are listed in the table below. Create a histogram using intervals or bin widths of 8, so that's important. We want our bin widths on the bottom to be intervals of 8. Be sure to label your axes, and the y-axis should always be the frequency. Okay, so let's just start with labeling. So the first thing we do down here is we find the smallest value in our data set. So it looks like the smallest value in our data set is going to be 20. So that is what we're going to start with on our x-axis. So the smallest value is 20, and then we want our bin width to be 8. So that means every new line is going to be 8 more. So if I add 8, then that's going to be 28. Add 8 more, that's going to be 36. Add 8 more, that'll be 44, 52, 60, and I'm just skipping every other just because that's how I want it to be laid out. And then we're going to label the y-axis the frequency. And then this is going to be the winning Super Bowl scores. Okay, so let's go through and let's figure out the different intervals that we would need. So in this first interval, for it to be in there, it has to be a number that is actually less than 28. So this is going to be numbers that are from 20 to 27. This one would be 28 to 35. This would be 36 to 43, right? So one less. So then this would be 44 to 51, and then 52 to 59. So let's just do each interval. So first interval, let's do 20 to 27. So I'm just going to go through this list and find all the numbers that are between 20 and 27, and I'm going to highlight them. Okay, that's it. So then I'm going to count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of data. So on the frequency over here, I'm going to just label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this goes up to 6. So then I know this first bar, there are 6 pieces of data that go between 20 to 27. I'm just going to highlight it so we know that that's what that goes with in there. Okay, let's choose a different one. Let's go now 28 to 35. So if I'm going to highlight all numbers that are between 28 and 35. 28 and 35. Okay, I think that's it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then this is going to come up to 5, and then I'm going to highlight this. Okay, and then let's do numbers that are between 36 and 43. 36 and 43, there we go. So 5 as well. Okay, and then we have between, what's this next one going to be? 44 to 51. So these 40, so there's only 2 of them. And then last we have 52 to 59, and it looks like we just have 2 left over, so this bar is also going to be 2. Okay, so that's how we create our histogram. And now what we're going to do is we're going to plug this in our calculator just to make sure that it matches and that it checks. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So what you do is you go over to the stat, edit, you click enter, you clear this out, and I'm going to type all of those scores in. So I'm going to type in 20, okay, so I just entered all of those in the calculator. I just entered them all in L1, went through and double checked that these were all right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a histogram. So what you do is you do second y equals, so you're going to turn the stat plot on. So right now I have some things going on. So let's do this first one. I click enter and I want this to be on. So I'm going to click enter again. I'm going to go back to stat plot and I see this number 2 actually says on. So I'm going to click enter and I'm going to turn it off and then go back. So this one should say on. Click enter again. And now you can choose the different types of graph you want. So I'm going to go down here and I want to create a histogram. So I'm going to go to this right here and then make sure that it says we're getting it from list 1. And then if I click graph, it actually creates a histogram for us. Now, the one thing that we have to do is we have to change it to tell it what bin widths we want it to do it by. So we did bin widths of 8. So you have to go into this window, excuse me, and you're going to change this X scale to be 8. You want your X minimum to be the smallest number. So we started with our smallest number being 20. And then if we look at what our largest number was 60. So I'm going to choose the X max to be 60. Now, if I click graph, these should match nicely. So if I do look, I can see that they look like they match. And then I can also click trace and it'll tell me that I have 6 data pieces that are less than 28, which is what we had over here. And then if I arrow over, you've got 5 data pieces that are less than 36. You've got 5 that are less than 44, which is what we had. And then you had 2 in these other bars. So then that means I did this right and it matches. So now the other question that it asks us right here is, what is the mean of the data and what is the range of the data? So go back to your stat, calc, and one variable stats. And then remember that we can find these in this table. So the mean is this X bar. So I'm just gonna write that the mean of this data is 34.85. And then the range again is your maximum minus your minimum. So if I scroll down here, I can see that my maximum was 55 and my minimum was 20. So I'm just gonna do 55 minus 20 and I will get that the range is 35. So that's how you guys go about doing those 2 questions right there, creating a histogram and then checking it with your calculator. I do have the steps right here so that you guys can go through and just double check those steps. And then I'm gonna have you guys try to do this one real quick. So I'm gonna pause my video and I'm gonna go through and just do it. And then I'm gonna unpause and let you guys check your answer. So it says, the following is data on the number of chocolate candies per bag of trail mix. Create a histogram using an interval of 20. So your bin width should be 20. Remember labels. What is the mean of the data? What is the range of the data? So take this data, and you guys can do this in your calculator if you want, instead of doing it by hand, and then make sure you label. So I'm gonna pause the video for now, and then when I come back, it is going to be completely done so you guys can just check your answers. Okay guys, this is what you should have got whenever you paused and started working through this problem. So you identified the minimum was 31, so that should have been where you started. You're using an interval of 20, so you should have counted up by 20s to create your bin widths. And then the maximum was 100, so I made this go to 111. And then in your calculator, you would want your, let's change this, your window, whenever you graph this, to go 31 being your X minimum, 111 being your X max, and your X scale, your bin width being 20. And then you can scroll just like we did in the last problem. You should have had 8 that were between 31 and 51. So 8 bags had 31 to 51 pieces of chocolate. 8 bags had 51 to 71. 1 bag had 71 to 91. And then 4 bags had 100 or 91 to 111. And then you go through the same process. You guys should have gotten your mean to be 61.1. You should have gotten your range to be 69, because if you do 100 minus 31, you get left with 69. And then just to check that you entered all of this data incorrectly, your check sum, remember that's that thing in your calculator that has that sum X, should be 1,283. If that doesn't match, then you guys want to go back and double check the numbers that you entered. So I hope that makes sense. There's gonna be a video number 2 coming at you that'll be about box plots and how we do those. And then you guys are gonna do a homework assignment on practicing this. That's it. Be looking out for video number 2.